But I think some people have got to be very cautious about going off to Spain and spending £100,000 on neurosurgery.
Moving on.
Thank you. So I'm here on behalf of my daughter, just picking up on your point. Recently discovered that she has got something wrong with her neck, ironically, and the vertebra is right up, caused by twin blocks when she had orthodontic treatment, pushed her jaw so far back that it's actually disaligned with one of the vertebrae in the neck. She's having treatment from a physical therapist. She's doing exercises in a non-invasive way. It's already making quite a significant difference to her energy. She's noticing it, seems to be unblocking something. So we think it's quite significant, but without going into overdrive about it. But we're exploring that. But the other exploration we're wondering, and I'd love to know what your thoughts about this, is that she suffers from, she's always anxious and switched on to fight-flight mode, that whole anxiety piece, and unable to be in a healing state. So she's not absorbing nutrients, so she's got flaky fingernails, she eats the best food under the sun, but she can't, she's got acne, she's very sluggish. So we're wondering whether that's how do we calm the body down? What's your thoughts around being in that kind of state?
Clearly she's got an anxiety problem which needs to be addressed, and I don't know what sort of treatment she's had for the anxiety, but I mean it sounds...
So we're quite convinced it's not a psychological problem.
Anxiety does come with some people with ME, and it does need treating needs managing by an appropriate health professional. I mean, so it may be a case that some form of CBT, plus or minus
or
some sort of
been through all of that. Have you any thoughts on retained reflexes?
What I am going to, you may disagree with, is that anxiety cannot produce food malnutrition.
No. The point is that she's in such a hyped state that she doesn't seem to be able to absorb the nutrients. So because she's
but anxiety can't prevent, can't block the absorption of nutrients. I'm going to be quite emphatic about that. I mean, she may not be eating very well and not taking in nutrients, but anxiety can't stop vital nutrients being absorbed.
So there's a whole issue around the gut. So we haven't got into that.
Yes.
A leaky gut thing, all of that.
I mean, the gut thing is fascinating. This is the subject of possibly another talk, and we've got there's a lot of people with ME/CFS have irritable bowel type symptomatology.
Yes.
We've got a leaflet on IBS type symptomatology, and if you've got IBS symptomatology with ME/CFS, then it's certainly worth at a simple level going down the dietary exclusion route, and then if you've got the appropriate advice that you can get hold of, then you perhaps try the FODMAP diet, which you're probably familiar with, which is a rather more difficult dietary approach to manage. And at the same point, the really crucial thing is you make sure someone who's got fatigue and irritable bowel syndrome hasn't actually got celiac disease, which is very easily misdiagnosed as ME/CFS in those sorts of circumstances.
Have you come across retained reflexes? Does that ring a bell with you at all? Nothing. No, this is the reflexes. It's a neurological approach around the idea of a nervous system not being fully developed.
No,
that's another thing.
I'm going to say simply answer no.
That's okay. We're exploring that as well at the moment.
Right, there was one down here.
Yeah.
Was there a question here from? I thought some. No.
I've got a quick question.
Yes. Right.
Supplements that you take. Are you saying that you only take vitamin D, nothing else?
I gave up taking supplements many years ago.
It's quite interesting to hear.
I take no certain supplements, but I do
Other
take,
than vitamin D.
I do now take a vitamin D.
And do you only take that in winter, all through the summer as well?
Well, I've only just started taking it, so I'm not sure. But I think I might just carry on. Because I think now the science behind vitamin D, low-level vitamin D deficiency is quite good, and I think this idea, especially people who are a bit more elderly, although I get out in sunlight quite a lot, I'm not really deficient there. I haven't had my vitamin D levels checked, but I do think it's worth doing. But otherwise, the only time I suggest people take a multivitamin capsule is if you've got some sort of dietary deficiency, or you're on some sort of dietary restriction where you may become nutritionally deficient in vitamins or supplements. But I'm not convinced that there is any need for people. This is very controversial, and people disagree very strongly. I know. I don't think there's any need for most people with ME/CFS to be spending money on dietary supplements and minerals.
Good.
Right, that'll do from the floor, if that's okay. We have a number of questions that the group has passed to Maxine. I'm going to give Dr. Shepherd
What
the
about
choice.
I'll do 2 or 3 of these quickly. So, the first one's quite a good one. How would I find a private GP with experience of ME? Simple answer to that is I know no private GPs with experience of ME. I do, however, know a few. I mean, the only way you're going to find one around here is obviously perhaps within the group. Someone may know someone who's willing to do that. But on the whole, private GPs are not terribly good with ME in my experience. It's probably just a waste of money unless you really can find someone who knows what they're talking about. As far as private consultants are concerned, there are very few private consultants that I would actually recommend anyone to go to. But there is a really excellent, and I've known Willie for many, many years, there's a really good, excellent infectious disease consultant, and I suspect some people here have already seen him, called Dr. William Weir. Willie used to be consultant in infectious diseases at the Royal Free Hospital, then he went abroad for a bit, and now he's come back to the UK. Well, he's been back in the UK for quite some time. So Willie now, I think at the moment he's doing an NHS locum, I think it was in Luton, because he's on the NICE guideline committee with me. But William Weir sees private patients. He's very, very good with this illness. He's seen lots and lots of people with it over many, many years. And he also does medico-legal stuff. He will help you with insurance and legal disputes that involve ME/CFS. So Willie sees a few private patients still. His consulting room is at 10 Harley Street, London W1. I don't have the telephone number off the top of my head, but I know if you put it in Google, you'll get it. But I think, like most of us who do any sort of private work in this area, he's got more work than he can cope
So
with.
he's not on the NHS?
Well,
He used to be. I'm sure I saw him about 20 years ago.
He hasn't got an NHS post in ME/CFS.
Right.
He's doing an NHS locum, as I say, at the moment, and I think it's in Luton, but it's not an ME/CFS service. So you can't go and see him on the NHS.
Yeah.
You can only go and see him at 10 Harley Street. Is that
Okay.
right? Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
right.
People think overgrowth of Candida is relevant to ME/CFS. There is no evidence, no scientific evidence that Candida infection is involved in this illness. It used to be a flavour of the month probably 20 years ago, and there are a number of studies done, they're all summarised in the purple book over there, which show that there's no link between Candida and ME/CFS. You do not need to go on an anti-Candida diet. You do not need to be taking horrible anti-Candida drugs. People with ME/CFS are not prone to develop Candida infections. It's something that happens with people who've got defective immune systems, like with AIDS. People with AIDS get really serious Candida infections, but people with ME/CFS do not get those sort of infections. Anything else here? Jambria, finding a cause in the blood test. The hormones influence ME/CFS. There is some, certainly in relation to female hormones, and we've got a couple of leaflets on this. We've got one on the menopause and HRT, one on premenstrual syndrome and ME/CFS, and certainly the menopause, and some people who get premenstrual syndrome get an exacerbation of ME/CFS symptoms, and there is some evidence, and the research on female hormone status is summarised in those leaflets. There is some evidence that there is a change in female hormone status, certainly in some people. And there was a chap called John Studd, and Nicholas Panay was his co-author on this. They published a study in The Lancet looking at female hormone status in ladies with ME/CFS. and found that there was a lowered level of estrogen in some of these ladies, and they recommended in those sort of circumstances that type of hormone replacement therapy might be worthwhile. So there's certainly something in that. But the main hormonal abnormality that we've discovered in this illness, and this is probably one of the most consistent research abnormalities that has been found to date, is that people with this illness have, in jargon, what's called a down-regulation of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal hormone axis. And you have this little master controller gland in the brain called the hypothalamus, which we think is quite an important part of the brain that's disturbed in this illness, because that's a thermostat for temperature control, appetite, and sleep, all things which seem to go wrong in this illness. And this is a master controller because below it sits another gland called the pituitary gland. And the hypothalamus is connected to the pituitary gland by blood vessels and hormones. And then there are other hormones go from the pituitary gland down to two glands called the adrenal glands, which sit above both of your kidneys. And the adrenal glands produce the stress hormone cortisol. So the hypothalamus instructs the pituitary, instructs the adrenals to produce cortisol, particularly at times of stress. And what we know is from, I think, probably about 30 studies now, and they're all summarised there in the Purple Book, is that people's axis, this important hormonal axis, is lowered, it's down-regulated. So there's a slightly lower output of cortisol from the adrenal glands in this illness. And there's a very interesting disease which sometimes gets misdiagnosed as ME/CFS called Addison's disease, where the adrenal glands totally pack up, or almost totally pack up, the production of cortisol. And they have to have, this is a life-threatening condition, but they get a sort of exaggerated form of ME in certain circumstances, certain ways. They're terribly fatigued, their blood pressure is down in the boots, they have cognitive dysfunction, they have abdominal symptoms, they have a lot of ME-type symptoms because their cortisol is really, really low. But that's life-threatening, and they have to go on to steroid substitution as a lifetime thing. And linking in with that, one of the other treatments that has been tried and really failed because of this low level of cortisol is that we have done clinical trials using low levels of something called hydrocortisone, which is a steroid drug, to see if that will help. And although it did produce some minor benefits, the overall feeling was, because there are obvious dangers to giving people prolonged periods of steroids, the disadvantages outweighed the very minor advantages to it. So that's sidetracking, but there is a hormonal element to cause in this illness, and it's what we call the neuroendocrine component, which is the nerve endocrine hormonal
So is there
aspect.
is there a specific test that you ask for then to?
Well, as part of, and it's in our leaflet on diagnosis, it's in detail in the Purple Book, everyone should have, and it's called a 9 AM cortisol test.
9 AM?
You can have it 9, it's called 9 AM,
Oh.
you normally do it. Yeah. But it's just a very simple screening test to make sure your cortisol levels are roughly normal. And if they are slightly lowered, then you will go off, this is normally done it's always done in hospital, you would then go off if the cortisol level was below and it was suggestive of Addison's disease, you would have probably what's called a synaptic test, which is a more complicated hospital-based test.
Right, okay.
But that should be part of the screening blood test before this diagnosis is made.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I've got one question because
Yeah.
I'm up the sharp end. How can this route help you find some sort of solution? Can we help you going forward? What would you like us to do?
Well, I think as an immediate action is to get in touch with your MP.
We've done that.
Well, let's put it this way, you might wish to get in touch with all your candidates. I don't know whether your MP's got a safe seat and it's a foregone conclusion here. As I say, Albans M.E is a name that crops up, and as far as I can gather is someone who is sympathetic.
We've tried this. She's
right.
written letters to various people, and all they've done is to brush it aside. So there's the parliamentary side, which is good. We'd like to help you. Sorry, I didn't know it's going to put you on the spot.
Yeah, it's put me on the spot. I don't have a simple answer to it. I mean, clearly, but we don't have any problem with this. People would donate bits of brain if you ask them to.
When you say contact our MPs, what would you like us to ask them to do?
Well, I'm hoping once the new Parliament's back that we will set up. I don't know whether you're familiar with things called our all-party parliamentary groups. We used to have an APPG on M.E, and then it unfortunately collapsed through lack of interest, because there's 600 parliamentary groups and it's very difficult getting MPs to go to these things. But I know Carol is very keen to set up the APPG again.
So we could lobby for that.
So you could lobby for that. I mean, there'll be people here who are outside the St Albans constituency. So I think as an immediate thing, once the election is over, and don't lobby before we've decided we're going to set it up. But if we do set it up, then please lobby your MP to come along and do that. As I say, we make announcements when we want some more blood samples for the biobank, which is patient input. I mean, clearly, if you want to raise money for research, we've got our research arm is called the Ramsey Research Fund, and that's ring fenced. There's no salaries to go in that. It all goes into funding research. There's no staff or anything. We pay that out of our general funds.
What about the Forward ME group? Is that charity or is that just like?
No, it's not. It doesn't have charitable status. It's just very much an informal group. And as I say, we meet with the Countess of Mar, who's very, very good. And,
so that people can't sort of donate to it or anything like that?
No, I mean it. It costs us £1,500 a year to have a stand and everything else at the Royal College of General Practitioners conference, but as happens with these things, we had a very generous. One of our members came along and said, "I think this is totally important what you're doing, and I'll pay for the stand," which she did.
Good. It's 12 minutes past 4. I'd like to say from here, thank you very much for all of you for coming. Most of all, Dr. Shepherd, thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much.
You're free to go. Isn't that right, Maxine? Anything you want to say, darling?
No, just that we've got the room till 5, so if you want to hang about, have a cup of tea and a chat with anyone, you're welcome. But if not, thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Dr. Shepherd and Mike and Sarah and everyone.
Right. I may be able to do a very quick question while I'm packing up, but I've got to try and see. My daughter works at telly. She's just come back from America, and I promised I would say a quick hello on the way home.
Thank you for your time.
I do need to try and get to
Are you going to take him to a station? Will you? Sure? Because I need help medicine. Tidying up. So he's in the
No, so if you come to the next one, there's a lot of planning to, but you know how it goes. Coughing on got chairs. It's quite a lot to do. Good idea, that one there, I can't even see. No, I magnified that. Did you? Yeah,
I've got it saved on my I love Lucy, there's one there. I'm definitely not 30, sure. You look like you're in the 30s.